Welcome to everyone that joined us. My name is Sebastian Pfautsch. I'll be your MC, your webinar host for today. We will take you through a very special webinar event that is called Green Infrastructure in Action. We will look into various aspects of green infrastructure and particularly what our organization is contributing to this space. We also, of course, need to acknowledge country. I would like to do that by paying my respect to Indigenous Australians and Torres Strait Islander people across the country. I'm streaming into this webinar from Darug country in the north of Sydney. I pay my respects to those who have cared for this country for tens of thousands of years. I would also like to acknowledge the enormous trauma that the assumption of terra nullius has caused in the past and is continuing to cause in the indigenous population of this country. The contents for today, we will go through what green infrastructure actually is. Then we will talk about AGIN and our mission and initiatives that happened in the past and that are projected to happen in 2025 and onwards. We will also look into what we call the project library, which is a new project we have developed over the past 8 months. And I'm very, very excited to launch it today and show you what the project library can do for you. At the end, we'll be happy to take your questions and try to answer them. There is a Q&A function embedded that you can use, and I really encourage everyone to drop as many questions as you want because there's a unique opportunity to get in touch with us and discuss your particular questions related to green infrastructure, also related to our organization, AGIN, the Australasian Green Infrastructure Network, and the project library, of course. Before we get going, we have 3 Slido questions for you today. By now, I guess most of you are familiar with Slido. It's a live voting platform. There's the QR code in the top left that you can scan with your phone. And then when you get to the Slido landing page, you can put hashtag AGIN into the browser that will open up into the Slido window. And then you will see the first question. We'll wait a few seconds for you to log in. We should see live on screen why you joined this webinar. So you can now select various options. Here we go. The first votes are coming in. I'll probably give you a few more seconds to log in and get to the first question. We're really interested to learn why you joined, because we expect that different members of the green infrastructure industry has joined today. Some of them will be members. I can already see that some of them are not members. It's always interesting to learn who had another reason to come along that we didn't capture, because we were trying really hard to figure out what are the best questions we can put on a single screen to ask you. If you can drop your vote for this one, that would be great. I'll wait another 10 seconds and then I'll go to the second question. It's interesting. It's a good mix. Most of them are not members of AGIN. This is, of course, the prompt for me to tell you that you should become a member of AGIN. And we'll get to that at the end as well. For all the attendants of this webinar, we have set up a special discount code for our membership, and we will show you how to get there at the end of the webinar. So there's a good mix. Still some changes happening. The other reasons are a little bit smaller. They have declined to 6%. That's good. So you all know why you're here. I think it's time for the second question. This one is a tricky one. And I'm very happy that we do this online and not in person, because it could have got out of hand. We would like to know what you think is the most important group of people that ensures green infrastructure is delivered. Who is responsible to actually deliver green infrastructure in our cities? What do you think? Of course, I'm biased. I put scientists in there. But I'm sure that each profession has its own role to play. We would like to know what you think is the most important profession or group of the green infrastructure society that delivers greening. At AGIN, we're always interested in not only delivering more green infrastructure, but particularly better quality. That's something that we picked up in many, many discussions with industry partners and key industry bodies, representatives of the green infrastructure industry, because often it only looks great for the first 6 months. And after that, the decline is very visible. And that undermines, of course, the capacity to deliver green infrastructure generally, because people think it's a waste of money, which we know, of course, it is not. But maintenance is a big issue. Architects are still at the top, right? Maybe we have more architects proportionally represented in the webinar. I'm not sure. We'll pick this apart later. Sadly, nobody thinks scientists are needed. We have developers here, sustainability professionals, equally with policy developers. That's interesting. A few more seconds and we get to the third question. More round of updates. No, I think that's it. Architects at the top, urban regional planners, and then policy developers. Not really a surprise. All right, last question. How well do you know what AGIN does? 1 means you really don't know what AGIN does. 7 means you have very good knowledge, probably be a member, maybe even a founding member of AGIN. How well do you know us? Quite a few newbies. That's good. Wow, great. We are reaching, of course, a lot of people that are interested in green infrastructure, but are not members of AGIN and therefore probably don't have a lot of knowledge about what we're doing. And this is great. So thanks for joining to figure out if AGIN has something that you're interested in. Very nice. Great, and welcome again to everyone. This is a very good segue to now hear from our first speaker, Luli, our members and engagement manager. So she works as a volunteer for AGIN and will tell us what we understand green infrastructure actually is. Over to you, Luli.
Thank you, Sebastian. Hi, everyone. I want to acknowledge that I am on screen, but from Camaragal land in the north of Sydney as well. And I like to start introducing green infrastructure by asking people something else to begin with. So I like to ask if you ever feel rejection of lifeless urban environment. So do you see a space like this one on the picture? Do you feel like this is where you would go take a coffee break? The answer for me is not really. It feels a bit cold. It feels a bit uninviting. And yeah, I'm not attracted by its color, its sharp edges. It's basically the feeling it gives me. Um, that feeling can be explained due to the innate and instinctive affinity humans have for other living organisms in nature. So basically, we are more drawn to spaces that have natural shapes, natural colors, nature itself, textures that we can feel and touch. Maybe that feeling when you see a very beautiful timber table and you want to just lay on top of it and hug it. That's called biophilia. That's that innate and instinctive affinity humans have for other living organisms in nature. So some of you might recognize the picture that's on the screen. That's Barangaroo Reserve. So it used to look like the picture in the slide before, very gray, very sharp, very uninviting. And it was turned into this beautiful space that now I would definitely go take my coffee break at. To feel that connection with nature, with water, with plants, and with those textures and yeah, sounds, natural sounds as well. So besides that affinity to the feeling that we get through biophilic environments, nature in cities have a lot of other benefits. So it goes way beyond that, maybe that mental health or that physical health that we can get an enhancement for through these spaces. It also has a lot of environmental, social, and economic benefits. So one of the biggest topics going around nowadays is the urban heat island effect, and we know how nature is key to help combat the heat island effect. So by incorporating natural elements in our surroundings, we can increase productivity for people that are working in different spaces. We can bring more biodiversity and habitat to our cities. We get more community integration because suddenly people are more outdoors, or if it is indoors, they're in a space that is offering that nature connection. So plenty of benefits for bringing nature back into our cities. If I was to talk about each of them, we could be here for hours. So what is really green infrastructure? And is there an official definition? The answer to that is no. There is an alignment of what the concept of green infrastructure represents worldwide. However, there's not one single way of defining it. In Australia, we have the definition of the Urban Green Infrastructure Handbook, which you can see there on the screen. It states that urban green infrastructure is a network of natural design or cultivated vegetated spaces in an urban environment, including blue-green elements which connect vegetation with water. So at AGIN, we simplify that a bit more. We have our own definition of green infrastructure. For us, we define it as nature-based infrastructure that utilizes natural assets like plants, soil, and water, managed in a way that provides ecosystem services to both people and wildlife. So even though the word green has been used to represent sustainable solutions, we're making that connection back to nature. So for us, the word green is used really to talk about plants and the green-blue environments. To simplify that a bit more, I'm going to describe a few of the elements that are considered to be part of green infrastructure. So basically, it's anything that builds our urban forest. So in a city, the most traditional green infrastructure elements, when you ask someone to name them, they are green roofs, green walls, rain gardens, street trees, wetlands, green facades, but it's a lot more than that. Sports fields, public gardens, private gardens, potted plants, even on a balcony, can be considered to be part of the urban green infrastructure. And again, going back to that urban forest concept. So basically anything that is a greening asset becomes part of that urban forest and can be considered green infrastructure. There are comments about the coldness of calling, for example, a tree infrastructure. However, this is to increase their value as an asset. Urban trees have to be managed and valued as infrastructure because they need their planning and budgets to match the benefits that we people and that biodiversity gets from them. So that's why we need to call them infrastructure. There's a lot of talk about urban canopies nowadays, but unfortunately, other elements that are not trees are not as well represented in conversation. So that's why from AGIN, we focus a little bit more on engineered green infrastructure on buildings. So more specifically, talking about green walls, green roofs, garden beds, planter boxes, and green facades. Of course, we are here for the representation of any green infrastructure element, but we like to start and focus a bit more on these ones. Trees alone can't hold the weight of urban cooling, for example. Other greening solutions can help combat the heat island effect, and also bring biodiversity back. Why we focus a bit more on these other solutions. I'm using One Central Park as an example because it's a project that most of you are aware of. Hopefully, a lot of you have visited the area in Sydney. And I like to point to the different elements on this building that you can see on the screen. So you can see there's green walls, which are the vegetated areas of that facade that show plants growing from the wall itself, from a vertical plane. Maybe you can call it also a vertical garden. Then there's green facades, which are plants that are climbing or cascading from a base. So you can see there on the side of the largest green wall on the right-hand side picture that these plants are climbing up the trellis system. And then we also have green roofs, as you can see on the top left corner, garden beds on the bottom picture, and planter boxes that are part of that green facade system. So what could greening our cities look like? I love turning renders into reality, bringing them down to earth. I don't think the render is moving, but I'll just move forward to the next slide. Basically, there's a company that did these renders called Guerrilla Greening, which show different cities with a rendered concept of what it would look like if it was planted, it had a lot more plants around it, a lot more green infrastructure on it. However, it's not as simple as that because renders are virtual and we are here living and working in real environments. So to turn renders into reality, we need to talk about a lot of considerations. It's not that simple. So again, using One Central Park as an example, looking at this image, you can think about the construction, install and maintenance requirements, plant selection expectations, environmental impacts. So some questions that you need to ask yourself or your team if you're working with someone for a green infrastructure project is, are the walls structurally suitable? Is there fire compliance regulations? How will the maintenance team access the building facade to maintain that space? It takes more than a traditional team that works at height. It has to be someone that has expertise in working at heights, but also combined with horticulture and construction knowledge. Are the plans in the original design suitable for the wall orientation, for example? Or are there expectations of a green facade covering up a whole facade element in not realistic times? So for example, a green facade can take a couple of years to grow until it looks like a render might be showing it. So need to manage those expectations. And the other thing that's very important to talk about is if you're installing a green wall, for example, does the system align with water-saving ESG goals? So again, all of different technical considerations to think about when you're planning these elements. So currently, it's very hard to understand who to go speak to when you want to tackle these considerations, or if you want to understand more about their benefits. So where can you find guidance or support when working with urban green infrastructure? And that's where AGIN comes in, and we can find out more.
Thank you, Luli. Great presentation, summing up what green infrastructure really is. I just wanted to remind everyone, please drop your questions in the Q&A function, and you can also upvote questions. So you don't have to necessarily ask your own questions, but if there's a question that you find particularly interesting, you can actually upvote it. So it is ensured, if it is sitting at the top, that we actually can talk about it in the Q&A section of our webinar. Luli, I've got maybe one quick question for you. We live in a warming world. Can you, from your research that you've done, give a quick outlook how you expect that all these positive functions of green infrastructure will be influenced by a warming climate in our cities, and if that makes it even more important to have green infrastructure in our cities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think we'll get there without nature and without green infrastructure solutions. If our goal is to cool down our cities, we can feel it. I can feel it in the space that you can't see because of my background. I have a very low roof on top of me. Like, I so wish this roof was a green roof so that I would be way cooler in summer. So without having nature on our side, we won't get to cool our cities as much as we wanted to. So yeah, we do need a bit more regulation for that to happen, though, unfortunately.
Thank you. Thank you again for your presentation. We're moving on, and I would like now to introduce Gail Hall, who is the president of the Australasian Green Infrastructure Network, talking us through what AGIN is actually doing. So we're linking that to the big bars that we had for 1 and 2 stars in our Slido presentation. Gail, over to you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Hi, everyone, and welcome. So great to see both familiar and new names in the registration list today. As Sebastian said, I'm Gail. I'm president of the Australasian Green Infrastructure Network, or AGIN, as we call it for short. It's a bit easier to handle in the mouth. So today I want to share a little bit about who we are, what we're working on right now, and how we're growing. But more than that, I want to invite you into a conversation about the future of our cities and communities and the role that we can all play in shaping them. So let me just check the slides working. I'll just move on to the next slide. Yep. So AGIN is a network of passionate urban greeners, people like you, who believe in the power of nature to transform our built environments. We span Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand, and we come from all corners of industry, government, and research. What unites us is a shared mission to create healthier, more livable, and climate resilient communities through high quality urban green infrastructure. We exist to promote urban greening as a pathway to better health, stronger communities, and climate resilience. AGIN is fully independent and run by volunteers. We're all volunteers in this presentation today. And we're funded through member contributions and generous support from sponsors. So we all know the challenges: urban heat, flooding, biodiversity loss, and the growing impacts of climate change. But we also know the solutions. Green infrastructure like green roofs, green facades and walls, rain gardens and urban forests offer a nature-based response to these challenges. It's not just about aesthetics, it's about function, it's about resilience, and it's about well-being for people and for planet. The current state of urban greening in Australia, the data shows, just in the bottom right-hand corner there, that the total green space of canopy, shrubs and turf in major Australian cities, this is from a few years ago, but it's decreasing. And year on year, we're getting greyer, with less jungle and more urban. In the top left, you can see why. As we densify, we greyify. increasing heat, flooding, and decreasing biodiversity. This is happening in our city centres, in our existing suburbs, and in our new suburbs. Over to the next slide. Oh, sorry about that. So at AGIN, we felt that there was a gap where professional bodies bring their professions together to progress things for that profession. It was really interesting seeing those Slido results earlier around who's come to this presentation or thinks who is important in green infrastructure in particular. What we tend to focus on is bringing people together to progress urban greening. So we connect practitioners, researchers and policymakers to share knowledge, strengthen policy and improve practice, because we can't progress in silos. We know this time and time again, we have issues in this space. And we're not just talking about green infrastructure, we're talking about helping to shape how it's designed, how it's implemented and how it's importantly maintained. So whether it's through collaborative projects, policy input, or knowledge sharing, the intent for AGIN is to build a community of practice that's grounded in evidence and driven by impact. So our strategic direction. We launched our roadmap in 2023 to guide AGIN's direction and impact. There are 4 strategic pillars that shape our work. So these are advocate, pushing for green infrastructure in those early design and policy stages. Educate, building capacity or capability rather through knowledge sharing. Accredit, so looking at how we can support professional development and recognition. And certify, working towards quality certification system. The plan's not just about AGIN, it's about enabling green infrastructure to thrive across all our cities and towns. We're focused on initiatives aligned with our pillars and building also the operational foundation to support long-term success for AGIN. So what does that look like for us? Sorry, this is probably a little bit small for you to see. In terms of our achievements, we have organisational milestones in the top there. AGIN was formalised in 2023. We developed our first strategic plan, which I've just mentioned, in 2024. We became a company and a registered charity so that we can take donations and do work in a different way last year, or earlier this year actually, in fact. And we've joined the World Green Infrastructure Network, which is a network of other green infrastructure associations. We supported the World Green Infrastructure Congress that made it to Aotearoa, New Zealand last year. And we built and launched the AGIN website, which you hopefully have had a chance to look at. If not, check it out, agin.org.au. And we have a regular newsletter and an active LinkedIn page. So other things that we've done, we've got significant in-person events that we've held and attendance. So I've presented at a number of different conferences and seminars. And lastly, and I think really importantly, our advocacy work. So we've been doing some advocacy work specifically at both federal level, so for example, the National Urban Policy, we've put in submissions regarding that. We've worked at the local level for the City of Melbourne Planning Scheme Amendment that's focusing on greening. We've worked at the state level for, we've got the Green Adelaide Urban Greening Strategy. All these things we've been putting in either letters of support when we think they're needed, or provided some feedback to improve them. But realistically, what we actually do think is that advocacy is stronger with others. And to strengthen our voice, we are leading the National Urban Green Infrastructure Roundtable. You can see the people who are included in that in this slide. It's a group of associations who need to be involved in UGI for success from our perspective. We don't have the Architects Institute in there, which is very interesting. That's something we should perhaps pursue. But what we've done is we've provided collective advocacy. We've developed a position statement. You can read that on our website, and we're now working on 2 major business cases, one of which is a green infrastructure strategy, a national strategy, and Australian standards. These are the 2 things that we think are really important to progress green infrastructure in Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand. So lastly, just want to give you a bit of a rundown of who is in AGIN. We're still a young organisation, and like any living system, we're evolving. Right now, we're building our community, our members, and sponsors. But what's been clear from the start is that AGIN is not just an organisation, it's a network. It's a space for collaboration, for learning, and for leadership. So what's next? We're building momentum, and we're growing our reach, and we're inviting more voices into the conversation. Whether you're a designer, a policymaker, a researcher, or an advocate, there's a place for you here, not because we need more members, but because the work ahead needs more collaborators. If today sparks something in you, an idea, a question, a connection, please reach out and talk to us. We want to build something that's lasting together and increase greening in our cities. If you do want to join though, there is a discount code just there in the bottom right-hand corner to take advantage of, and you may well want to consider this when you hear from Mitch, who is coming up next to talk about our latest member benefit, the launch of a new resource, and I won't spoil it, although Sebastian has already mentioned the project library. So back to you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Gail. Excellent introduction to what we're doing and who we are. And I want to stress again that, yes, we are all volunteers, and we absolutely require the support from our members to have the organization functioning, but also to grow the impact that we all collectively want to have in our cities. Gail, just a quick question. You mentioned 2 projects that are currently underway with AGIN, the National Urban Green Infrastructure Strategy and also the Standard. Now, AGIN is only 2 years old and has done a lot already. What do you see of those 2 projects going forward rapidly and influencing the development and policies around green infrastructure in the next 2 years? So 2 years gone, what's up for the next 2?
What can we achieve in 2 years? Oh, well, we should have a strategic plan for that. So what I will just say is those 2 projects I mentioned are, we're developing the business cases. They're really quite large projects and they will take some time. But the reason we're focusing on those 2 is because I think both the policy landscape, if we can get adequate targets and policy in place, and if we can get adequate standards so that green infrastructure is built well to last, these are really, really important things that I think will change the landscape for us in Australian cities. So we at this point are looking to develop business cases for both, and the intent is that we will seek funding to basically develop those with those partners that I mentioned on the other page, which is the Urban Green Infrastructure Roundtable.
Great, thank you, Gail. And it enforces again, if you are interested in helping shape these policies and influence how green infrastructure is delivered in your city, please join us. Every hand on deck can help make these very complex tasks easier on all of us, and then we can work with them. As Gail mentioned, we are up to our last section now, and I would like to introduce Mitch, our web designer behind the work on the new service, product, call it what you may. We call it a library, which of course, it's a digital library, not like a physical library will ever be full. It has a lot of capacity to take up new projects, and Mitch will introduce now how this all works and looks like. Mitch, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, team. First, I just want to do a quick acknowledgement of the traditional custodians of the magnificent lands on which I live and work, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, whose deep knowledge and connection to country has sustained these landscapes for tens and thousands of years. My name's Mitch. I am a volunteer for the AGIN organisation, and I am a landscape architect working for Green, and I have had a lot to do with the development of the website and the promotion and advocacy of green infrastructure. So the latest membership benefit that we're working on is the project library. And then one should ask the question, why create a project library? There are project libraries existing out there in the world. However, what we need to acknowledge is that the predominant of the projects are focused in the Northern Hemisphere, Northern America, and Europe is very well represented, but typically you come down to our corner of the world and there's only a handful of projects. Now, we know at AGIN, we've been discussing this topic a lot over the many years as this organisation has grown, and we know that there are dozens, hundreds of projects across our capital cities, not just here in Australia, as I've got an example of on screen, but also for our region in this world. And so it's really important that project library comes to fruition so that we can start, advocating for green infrastructure, and that's truly how we're going to improve our built environment that we live in. So then, who is exactly the project library for? Really, first and foremost, it stands for anyone. The intent is that those who come to the AGIN website will be pleasantly greeted with a substantial project library that exemplifies what is green infrastructure in all of its different forms and typologies, and where is it. Secondly, this project library functions for the members. This is where we truly get to learn and explore other examples of green infrastructure in different cities, in different regions, or sometimes even, in our own backyards in terms of, just down the road from where I work, or, where I've just traveled to. We find great examples of green infrastructure throughout the urban environment, but having them listed and being able to learn from them is quite important. And thirdly, the other important thing for a project library is for our corporate members and sponsors to truly share all of the great work that they're doing so that we can keep developing best practice, so that we can network amongst ourselves. It's not necessarily about, what can we do, but sometimes it's important to know who can do it and how it can be done. So I touched on this before, but what isn't picked up by that that interactive map that I showed earlier is, that was just one typology of green infrastructure. But in actual fact, there is a lot. And I think that's why a lot of previous libraries or other websites that are hosting some sort of database of great green infrastructure projects focus a little bit more narrowly, but in recent, development, as the AGIN network has identified, there are many different ways that we can enhance our built environment. So off to the left there's a list of the typologies that that we'll launch initially. Part of this was picking the lowest hanging fruit. Sometimes it's really easy to, identify these projects. I'm sure everyone in the room can think of examples of green roofs, green walls, facade greening, planter box or podium gardens, interior gardens. But by no means is this complete. And with the development of this tool, we're just going to continue to expand. So there's lots of other subcategories and different ways that we can green our built environment, bringing us naturally a lot closer to combining the natural world and our built environment. So that brings us to project library. What does it look like? So the landing page gives us a great opportunity to spotlight some recent projects. You know, these effectively stand as a feature and can toggle automatically on a gallery so that immediately you're greeted with some of the most recent and successful examples of green infrastructure in Australasia, followed by an ability to be able to search. We'll touch on some of the ways in which you could be searching for projects a little bit later. It's detailed in one of the project pages quite well. But think of it as, do you want to know, what other green infrastructure projects are in Melbourne? Typing Melbourne in, for example, will bring you a subset of those that, are in that city. But you can also search by typology. You could search by company. You can, the project library and its database is built so that projects are easily accessible. But perhaps you're only coming to green infrastructure and you're really only interested in how do I do some facade greening? Or perhaps you're only really interested in, I want an extensive green roof. So we've broken it out into typologies too, because we anticipate that the library is going to get quite large quite quick. And what will happen from that is you'll need or want a way of filtering through these results. Here's an example of how the rest of the project library page will fill out. And so as projects are entered into the database, that they will just continue to tile down the page. At the moment of launch, we've got projects from both our primary sponsors, which is Phytogreen and Tensile. But for this presentation, I've only actually got the Phytogreen projects on hand, purely a tech thing in the background. So then what does a project page look like? Because as you click on any one of those projects, it's important to demonstrate, well, what does make this project special? Why are we highlighting it? What do we want to see? What do we want to be inspired by? What do we want to learn? So there's a gallery where we get to display, some of our proudest moments in terms of either how the project came together or what does it look like as we speak. And it's a clickable gallery. So all of those images can be rotated through and enlarged. And followed by some key information, which is, important details about the project, what you would want to learn about the project, who and how it was put together. Followed by some breakout details. And this is really this is important information now because you can start to visualize how you might actually search for projects or how you might want to filter the results based on, I want something similar for my build, or this would be lovely to integrate. So what we've done is we've got a database that truly pulls out the team that's involved. That includes people like members as the client and developers, that's the green infrastructure specialist, the architect, the landscape architect, the builder, the specialist supplier, the maintenance provider. The list goes on. It just, if there's any category that hasn't been filled, it just hides. So in this circumstance, we've got quite a few professionals in which you can now link to the project and understand how these things come to fruition. If you want to go see it, it's important to know where it is, and also maybe how accessible it is in terms of, is this publicly accessible? Are you entering a commercial space? There are other metrics that are really important that are built into the database, largely surrounding your local government area, which just gives you, again, another way of filtering your results or finding similar things in whether it be a similar locality or potentially a similar bioregion. You can filter the results that way, followed by just some important information that helps really hone what are we contributing to the built environment, and how is this project significant. One slide. There we go. Thank you. Which then brings us to how do we progress from this page, or what's the next step? And that's when you understand who's involved in this project, how do you get in contact with them? Brings to the third page that we're launching, which is the company page. So all these projects get submitted by corporate members and sponsors. And then the delivery is we have they appear in the project library, there are project pages, and then there's a company page. So a dedicated company page, which gives the opportunity to highlight or provide a snapshot of, who is this company and why do they operate the way they do? What role do they play in the green infrastructure industry? And the areas of specialization and services. We're providing, of course, contact details. That's the most important part about a network, is how do we contact them? Where do we learn more? Followed by the beauty of building a library like this that's connected to a rigorous database behind it all is that projects link and just fall through. So this really gives the opportunity. So, if there are two companies that collaborate on on the same project, for example, there's a couple of projects in this list that Tensile has been a part of, the other sponsor I mentioned earlier. Those same projects appear on their page, and this is truly how we're going to get that cross-pollination between all the different professionals in this space, is, networking them together with the projects. So that's a pretty good snapshot of where the project library is at. We're ready to publish straight to the website. Just last night we had an influx of projects to come, and then what we'll be asking for next is that our corporate members and AGIN members start to think about projects of interest and value to them, so that we can keep developing this library. And I'm excited to see it come to fruition.
Thank you, Mitch. I just quickly wanted to acknowledge also the second brain behind the development of the project library, which is Scott. But Scott.
Sorry, Scott, I forgot to mention it.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. Scott wasn't able to join us today, so thanks very much for the presentation and the introduction to the various functionalities of the project library. Because everything looks so shiny on the outside, we often forget how much it really takes in the background. And my question wouldn't be so much for you on the looks or on what is included and how to do it, but what was the trickiest part to resolve when making this project library happen? What really challenged you?
That's a great question. And there was actually a point where we needed to pivot at one point. We'd started going down a path that we reversed. And when we first started putting this together, it was very much focused on the company behind the project. And then we pivoted towards, hang on, this is about the project. So the project page serves as the conduit back into the library, but also in the other direction to those who contributed to the project. So it was about making that project page so that when you, Sebastian, pick a project, because it looks inspirational on face value, because you'll see it visually first, you go into that project and you see the collaborative team that was actually a part of it. And knowing who to contact or who to ask the questions to sometimes reveals, the inner workings to how these projects come together. Most, from my experience, and I think it's a shared experience across our industry, because it's growing and developing, like we're all in this open promotion and collaborative mode where like we want to share good examples and best practice of how to get green infrastructure into our urban environment, because it's as much as we we want to think that these systems look and feel like nature. It's actually a highly engineered system. It's a highly engineered feat that we're trying to achieve, and there is a way to do it. So the pivot point, really, to answer your question, was we did change it so it was project focused, and then that is how you get the collaboration. That's how you network these in.
Great insights. Thank you, Mitch. I would like to re-invite Luli and Gail back onto the screen. And I've seen, that's why I said I've fiddled around in the Q&A. I've seen that we've got quite a few questions. We may not get through all of them, but it would be great if we can at least answer a few for those that have posted them. Now I need to go back to the Q&A. I hope it doesn't mute me automatically. Let's see what happens.
I have responded to a couple of questions in the Q&A that were more around AGIN, but I've left a few of the juicy questions for you to ask us.
Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Or have I been muted? I have not been muted. Okay. Let's start. There was a question from Radha. Can I be a member in an individual capacity? I think that's a great question for you, Gail.
Yep, and I have responded in the chat, but absolutely, we have professional and concession memberships. Both are individual. So yeah, have a look, and I've put a link to the membership page of our website in the chat as well.
Excellent. I myself had the discussion with, I'm working at Western Sydney University, and I had the discussion with my university to join as a university, which then gives us a certain capacity to bring in a number of members. At the moment, I'm still signed up as an individual because my university said we want to see first what our network can actually deliver. So I think now is the time that I renew that conversation, because we're really starting to see a lot of things happening as outputs from AGIN. There are questions related to maintenance. Maybe I flip that to you, Luli. There's a question about maintenance issues concerning green infrastructure. How would you address that? I know that the building that you showed in your presentation, Luli, has a lot of maintenance done to it, and it is very expensive to maintain this beautiful green infrastructure. There's another question that's also related to the climate impacts, storms, for example, on green facades and green roofs. Maybe you can say something about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mitch, feel free to jump in, because that is absolutely Mitch's role at Green. But I used to work at Jungify and doing some of these preliminary assessments for green infrastructure projects. And maintenance was usually the question that we had to spend a lot more time on, especially because there's a bit of an assumption that nature looks after itself, that it will be all right, and that it will be watered by rain and things like that. And that's not completely true, or I would say in the slight less true. You definitely need to have a maintenance plan allocated to pretty much 99% of infrastructure elements, I would say. There might be the odd one that can hang on its own. But yeah, like you have to, as I said on the slide about, for example, working at heights, you need a team that can not only be abseiling from the facade of a building, but also understand how to maintain a plant, or how to maybe fix something on the construction side of things. So if you don't plan for maintenance, most probably the project will fail, and that's where the also the operation costs also need to be discussed at the start of the project. Mitch, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I did actually. It comes up a lot. I mean, maintenance is one of those, often, unfortunately, it's an afterthought of green infrastructure. And the stakeholdership changes. When we start planning green infrastructure, it's best that we plan a maintenance strategy, but often, 5 years after practical completion, 10 years, 15 years, all of those stakeholders that were a part of the project early are no longer with the project, and now it's down to base building and a horticultural contractor. And there's no escaping maintenance. All gardens require maintenance, and green infrastructure being a highly engineered solution should always come with maintenance too, to protect that asset. One idea we had just recently, and this is actually so new, we haven't discussed it as a group, but one of the metrics on the project page, really could speak to what does it take to maintain this project. It might not be specific enough to say how many hours it takes to maintain, but what might be really insightful are things like, how is it even accessed? Because a lot of people don't realize that green infrastructure, by virtue of being stuck on the side of a building, is often maintained by a ropes technician or access equipment like a scissor lift or knuckle boom. So yeah, there's definitely an opportunity for us to highlight to the industry and truly guide, how do we get some great maintenance practices in and around green infrastructure. I wouldn't say maintenance costs should be it's not prohibitive of a project moving forward.
Thank you both. Maybe we have time for one more question before I close. There was a question about where to find funding for bespoke green walls. The first question I would have to that question was, is it a new build? Is it an existing building? Is it strata? Who is the owner? So it's a very complex question. I'm not aware that there are grants available, say, from local or state or federal government organizations to build these installations. Maybe, Mitch, from your experience, where are the funds coming from when you build vertical green infrastructure? Is it all private?
Predominantly is how it comes to Fighter
Yeah.
Green, yes.
Yeah, I was expecting that. Well, we're at 12:59. With my German background, I love to be on time. So thank you, Gail, Luli, and Mitch for answering those questions. I would like to reiterate that we very much welcome you to join us to build this AGIN, Australasian Green Infrastructure Network, into something that is truly a voice for green infrastructure in Australia. You see on this slide our webpage, our email contact. There's also the QR code again that Gail already showed you, where you can link into our webpage, look at memberships, and see how you can get a discounted membership for your first year. Thank you for joining us in this inaugural webinar from AGIN that we proudly streamed to you wherever you are. I hope you have a lovely Tuesday afternoon and hope to see you in our meetings and webinars that are coming forward over the next few months and possibly years. Thanks very much for joining, and all the best.